thank you for coming, Amber. Your full name is Amber Thompson, and you are from Sharpsburg. I think it's a nice city, right? Or is it still a
It's a
borough?
borough still.
It has
Yeah.
own mayor, right?
Yep. Brittany
Okay.
Reno.
All right. I think I interviewed her once for New Sun Rising, and
Mm-hmm. That
uh,
makes sense.
yeah, I think my daughter um, has a has a therapist there, and I remember the traffic jam,
Yeah.
right? There's a construction or something, right, for that
Yeah, we're
inter.
right in between Highland Park Bridge and like the 52nd Street Bridge. So constant
Right. And
traffic.
it's like
Yeah.
I think they blocked the exit, so everybody had to take the Freeport, right? So
Yep.
it was a mess.
Bad. Very, very bad.
All right. So thank you for joining me here. And we just started doing this conversation. So the convos they call it,
Mm-hmm.
where Storyburgh would like to speak with as many people as we can throughout the neighborhood of Pittsburgh and beyond, um, and and would like to know their experiences, successes, and struggles and frustrations as well. And we'd like to share. And I think with the continuing struggles that we have everywhere, and especially for this, the Convos is in Pittsburgh. We just have to be open about it and transparent about it
Mm-hmm.
to talk about it. And we don't want to offend anyone, but we just want to state the facts, right?
Right.
And if any of you uh, disagrees with us, then let me know. Give me a call, send me an email, and we can talk. You can sit right there and we can talk. So I come across your name and your workshop with the title of the Biasing Organizations Operations that you gave at the 2022 Pittsburgh Racial Justice Summit.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so intrigued that, in fact, I watched your entire recorded video while I was preparing myself for the 2023 summit. I was not a speaker, or I had a workshop, but my wife had a workshop. So I was like, oh, what is this summit? It was the first time. So I looked it up and then came up, browsed all the workshop titles, and then I was like, what is this? And then yeah, and yeah, I was glad that I saw that, and then I watched the entire recorded video. I made some notes, and I think throughout this conversation there were some quotables that kind of like that I agree, and I like to elaborate on that. I would like you to elaborate on that and give perspective on those stuff. And I think it's great. So why don't you tell us about who you are, where you're from, where your educational background, and why you in this space, a space that people are cringy about, which is transparency. All right.
Yeah, that's so funny. My daughter calls me cringy mommy. Because, yeah, that is exactly what's going on. So I moved to Pittsburgh to finish like undergrad at Point Park, transferred from WVU. But I'm originally from Johnstown, Franklin Borough, small little borough out like right outside the city. Super poor. We had Bethlehem still was headquartered in Franklin Borough. And so I come from, very blue collar, working class, poor neighborhood, but would have never guessed it. Everyone finds out later in life where they were at because, we had a great upbringing, but I did go to school at Conemaugh Valley. When I was coming up, there was one woman on the school board, all white men. Most of our teachers were white men. I did have a great education though, so I'm not knocking my teachers. But it wasn't until I got to college that I realized, oh, I actually can excel in schoolwork. Like I just wasn't, I I was judged and dealing with a lot of racism and misogyny growing up in Johnstown. So, you know, things just weren't afforded or veiled to me because of my background. Once I had my daughter, though, she got diagnosed with epilepsy. My mother went in the hospital at the same night with an aneurysm. She got flown in from Johnstown, and I found myself, and I was working at Family Links, I was working at Family Links at the time, and I found in youth advocate programs, working in both systems, right? Working in Children's Hospital and UPMC at the same time, and struggle. When I say struggling, I lost years of my life. First 3 years working with my mom, and then 7 years with my daughter with Children's and UPMC in general. If I was clinically, traditionally trained, as my background's behavioral sociology, I grew up on the DSM. I've been volunteering and doing advocacy work since I was probably like 12, 13. This is my family I come from. This is what I was born into. So it made no sense that with as much knowledge and resources I had, I still couldn't navigate either of these systems. And if I can't do it, who can? And then my daughter goes into school, so now I'm fighting mental health, physical health, education. A lot of my advocacy came from working on behalf of the work I did with Pittsburgh Public, working on their K through 5th grade suspension, not closing Woolslayer Elementary, working with parent groups in the Anaheim Institute, or Amherst. Which one is it? Anyway.
Emerson.
That is the name of the neighborhood. It's a name. Look, no, there's another. And this institute is in Boston University. But point being, how I found myself in this space was I ended up working at CYF, and I had a director there, Natalie, who saw something in me no one else saw. Well, people saw now that I understand what they've seen. She basically was asking me to join a special group to analyze the complex cases in CYF. How can we, work better with the courts? What could we standardize? What kind of recommendations should we be making? How should we be monitoring it? But I wasn't a caseworker. I was doing something else. So I was putting these plans together, SOPs, standard operating procedures, providing feedback. And one of my colleagues was like, do you know what organization development is? I'm like, no, I have no clue. He's like, well, that's what you're doing. These people make a lot of money. So at that time I was graduating from Point Park, and the city had contracted with a consultant to redo CYF and analyze it through like a kinship care model. So I did the same thing. I did my undergrad dissertation on the kinship care model for Allegheny County, and my report matched their report. Mm. I didn't get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars though, but I did get a lot of data. And from there it was like, oh, I actually have a skill. I went to Penn State, fought with all my professors. Now I go back and I want to send them an email and be like, I told you so. Because I was predicting what we're going through now in regards to brand awareness and people advocating or, through their dollars, through their labor, through their community resources. This is no longer going to be like a traditional marketing campaign or traditional consultations where we wait and see. We should be ahead of the curve, right? So I got a job at QVC. Had a wonderful boss as a grad intern, and was like, basically let me go underground. QVC pays all this money. They have everything. It's a global, it's communications, retail. There are a lot of different industries, and I got to collect my own data throughout the world and basically brought it to the VPs like, this is what your internal data says. That's what my data says. and really butting heads with a lot of executives because I'm an intern. I don't have nothing to lose. I had nothing to lose. Like,
That's a great spirit.
it was the best time because I got to build what I'm working on now, like my platform now. Collecting that data through like a third party, right? Building the trust with the colleagues, building and seeing it how I think a lot of people approach us as executives are there on behalf of the company, but they're individuals too. They're people too, right? So I get to build trust with people who knew they were challenged, knew they couldn't do what they're tasked to do, and was looking for some option. And that's what I was providing them. So I did a lot of great things at QVC, came back to Pittsburgh, and started my own consulting company and learned, through that, a lot of consulting is really the problem. Whenever we're talking about change management, and everyone's like, 90% of change initiatives fail. They were set up, designed to fail. That's the consultative process is that. A lot of the work we're doing can't be project based. And that's the model. The McKinsey model is just to give you enough to fail. So you have to keep coming back. And a lot of people copy that model. I don't, because.
So you're saying that a lot of management consultants, they design it, or they use that the project modeling, in which that the result or the outcome is not sustainable, that they need an add-on,
yes,
or a follow-up.
Always.
So it's like a industrialization complex, right?
Right.
So they're there to help you, not so you don't need them anymore,
exactly,
but they continue to
need you.
So so they could grow bigger and more money and whatever, right?
More money.
I mean, it's really yeah. Wow.
And, but in this cringy space, that's a very exploitative way to approach this, and it's actually more harmful, which is where we're at today, which is what I was predicting in college. That this emergence model, right? Emergent leadership, emergent organizational development, these waiting and seeing, and acting like we can't see what the outcomes are going to be based on data. Having a data-centered process is really hurting us. So I just don't do the, if you reach out to me for a strategic plan, probably not doing a strategic plan because you probably need some foundational work to be able to implement a plan, which a lot of organizations are going through right now, strategic planning. The ones that I know, I'm like, I know your organization needs internal work, groundwork before you can carry out a plan. So that's where I'm at. Like, I'll entertain the conversation. I'm already anticipating what's going to happen, and I give my recommendation to do that groundwork because it's better.
Right, because each organization has their own culture, and sometimes, as a consultant, you are an outside person, and when you come in, sometimes or often, more often than not, that the people internally, they say, I knew that already.
Exactly.
Why are you bringing the consultant? Well, I think from the management perspective, they want to say, I don't say it, he says it, right? So it's like, okay,
I'll say
want to
it.
blame them? Exactly.
Always, I will absolutely say it.
Right, and then from the workers' perspective, they say, oh, we can do it ourselves. I mean, so it's kind of like I see that's a strategy as well.
Yes.
That because you get angry when somebody else says it, and then it burns your passion to fix it yourself, and then do it, right? So you, as a consultant, you give them the tools, you give some perspective, you get some BKM, best known methods, and then you can say, hey, you have this template. Well, you feel free to use it or not.
Exactly.
But you have the ground, you know the culture. This is the groundwork. This is the best known method, and if you need me more, then give me a call.
Yeah, exactly. Right? I'm not trying to get more money out of folks. The way my platform's designed, whatever I learn in this company, I can come in, hit the ground running in the next.
Yeah.
That's what technology allows us to do. So the labor can be in that analysis, the labor can be in that coaching, the labor can be in the hand holding, but the labor is never in the data collection. The labor is never in like the aggregation or the disaggregation of the data. That should not be where labor is. And that's where majority consulting is. It's easy. Well, it's not easy to do, but it's easy to get the money.
It's doable.
Yeah.
And why is it called the bias? Why is that name? Why, because sometimes, people use, oh, you're biased, it has a negative connotation, though actually it's not. It's just like everybody has a bias in every single entity, a thing, it has a bias, right?
Exactly.
It is either susceptible to something or not. I mean, it's a bias by itself. It can sometimes it's inherent, sometimes it's environmental. It could be anything, but everybody has a bias. But again, we are in the cringy space, right? So people,
right.
And when you say the bias, like, what do you mean?
Yeah. I mean, the type of workshops and facilitations I do is teaching people how to use their bias, acknowledge it. And it's not I'm not ever saying this is unconscious. Conscious or not, the outcome is the same. I'm approaching it the same way. So I just want to mitigate bias. I want to interrupt decision making, but not through you learning how to interrupt your decision making, but putting tangible solutions or tangible interventions to stop the decision making or to hold the decision makers accountable for their decisions, and building that institutional knowledge as to why we continue to do these things. So there's a lot of folks who want to make change, and then there are folks who don't want to make change. Both of them have equal ownership in making this, well, not all the time, but hypothetically, let's say they have equal ownership. They may want different decisions made, but the way to do that equitably, they both benefit from it. It's just a matter of what is your objective? What is the scope? What's the context at which we're going through this for? And I approach it equitably, but understanding where the bias is in the decision, the person, understand the bias in the organization, understand the bias in the industry. We have institutional bias. So if we're all conscientious of our biases, we still have to operate in these systems, understanding how these systems also force us to make certain decisions and mitigate that and be able to communicate it and be accountable to the impact of those decisions. So yeah, I'm not ever saying we're getting rid of bias. Bias is here. And honestly, it helps a lot of people move through the world a lot faster. But I really just want to interrupt it, and not through a personable way. I want to interrupt it through processes and policies.
Yeah, I agree, completely agree with that. That, bias is something that we have to take advantage of. And that's, bias basically is like a momentum, right? You already have your momentum. So if you're trying to stop the momentum, it will be harder. And then you
go with it.
Go with it. It's like, I remember, I don't know, martial art, Aikido, I think I heard, right? So when people punch you, you don't try to stop it, but you actually grab that punching hand, and then you throw that person to where they want to go. I mean, like, it's just like
redirect
it. Exactly.
Still absolve the energy, but redirect
exactly. So you don't actually exert energy, but you're like, oh, you have a lot of energy. Okay, let me use that energy to throw you away. Yeah. So it's like,
oh, I like that. I like that analogy a lot.
Right. So and you mentioned, of course, the A word, right? The accountable, right? And I picked this quotable from you. There seems to be an uneasiness with the word accountability in this town. I think to get this from this the summit video that I watched. I completely agree with this. That's why we've been saying that, oh, we are in the cringy space, right? Because people's like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. Yeah, it's part of our job, I think, but but I don't want to talk about it, right? So can we just talk about something positive? They like to say that, okay, talk about something positive, but I agree that we probably have to end things in a positive way, but we have to acknowledge what things that we have done not so well in the past, and that's how we can work on. I think I remember a couple of weeks ago, I talked to my colleague about about good guys and bad guys. There's no good guys unless they have a bad guy, right? There's no
Right.
good outcome unless you have a bad outcome. I mean, this is something that you can. You use it as a leverage. You use it to improve yourself, right? And yeah, so a lot of things I think in this city that we have tons of projects. We have tons of things that are going on. It's like sometimes it looks like a sporadic, like a unorganized. But they never mention why do they have those projects? What's the foundation? What's the root cause of that project? What are they trying to solve? Is it trying to fix something that they have done wrong in the past, right? And I think that's so. And then you also mentioned about that that people who work to benefit marginalized people are not incentivized to achieve positive outcomes. So why is that the case? Do you know? I mean, I'm probably not. What's your conjecture? What's your guess? Because nobody knows, right? I mean, like,
Yeah, because that's what I'm trying to build the data to prove my case. There are in the VC space, in the tech space, a study came out with Stanford probably about 2 years ago. Basically, venture capitalists, people who invest in large tech companies through private equity firms or private equity money, intentionally invest in Black-led companies that are lower is not the word, that are less matured and aren't equal to development of the investors. So if an investor was looking at me, they'd be like, "Oh, she didn't go to Harvard. Her company's not headquartered in Silicon Valley. She's not part of this like elite network." But there are Black founders that are that they want to invest in intentionally. So what they're working with Stanford is deducing is that VCs are what is the word? It's competitive. The word is, I can't think of the word. Anyway, they intentionally don't invest in Black companies they know will succeed and outperform because of the VCs, the investors' egos, and competition. So they're trying to confirm their bias by not investing in someone that looks like them. So if anyone knows about systems, but I'm looking at venture capitalists and family foundations because they are also part of the PE system. They are also part of nonprofits. So all the folks running money, if venture capital as one silo does that, why wouldn't all money do that? And so when I say folks aren't incentivized to do that, we know women-led businesses and minority-owned businesses outperform their opposite counterparts. Why wouldn't we automatically invest there? So the incentive should be, well, you're going to put the returns back to your shareholders. The incentive should be you're going to hit your foundation marks, your reporting. You're going to achieve your goals for your grant reporting. The incentive should be the banks actually reinvesting in the communities that they've disinvested in or exploited for so long. But they're not doing that. So what my reason is, they are challenged, threatened. I think it was the word I was looking for was threatened, but there's a better word for threatened. Their egos don't allow them to see these folks as performing or successful.
They're not comfortable with working with people who don't look like them, or
they don't believe that they're outperforming. They don't believe that this data is real. They're still looking at data that's through stories, right? Is qualitative.
Right.
They don't value, in America, North America specifically, doesn't value qualitative data. So it's easy for banks,
especially in tech.
yes, right. Especially in tech.
Yeah,
But yeah, because they can't you can quantify qualitative data, but it's a specific type of data scientist. But they don't value qualitative data that proves that they're doing these things intentionally. But that Stanford report was one of the better ones to say, hey, here's the pattern, here's what you're not doing, here's what you are doing. But this is also going against your baseline. You having to make a return for your shareholders. That's where VC's at right now. So I think them being comfortable, I don't like to focus on it as them uncomfortable, because I do think in our region, we value mediocrity. So when you're not mediocre,
This is really cringy.
right? Yeah, I'm gonna take it there. I'm absolutely gonna take it there. People are invested in maintaining the status quo, but through mediocrity. And a lot of folks are not mediocre, but they are put in these positions to maintain that mediocrity.
Right.
They're not given the tools, the resources, or the backing, the championing to actually move some of these initiatives forward. There's some really great people in great positions that I have faith in, but also the institutions they're in, I don't trust.
Right. I think the mediocrity is based on doing what you have been doing forever, right? So the status quo. I think is if you do something that is groundbreaking, so doing something that is disruptive, right? People may say, oh, you're just trying to ruffle the feathers. You're making a lot of people uncomfortable. You're cringy, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's not helpful, right? I mean, I remember when I was in the corporate world, we actually allocated, given 100% whatever resources, either money or human or whatever. All right, so we have to allocate the mediocre stuff, but we also put the long-term disruptive technology that may ever realize, right? That may ever get there. I remember several years or decades ago, I'm dating myself, that we work on semiconductor based on organic matters, right? It's still not here. I mean, but I know that,
it exists.
It exists, probably still in the lab, right? If they can build it not from the semiconductor, but from an organic or from a cell, they're not there yet. Probably they can flip 1 to 0, but not in the massive, consistent, and replicable, manufacturable way, right? So same here,
right.
In this space, and whatever we do here, Pittsburghers, right? And especially for those with powers, they should be comfortable allocating. Okay, this is for the mediocres, and this is, I have to say that this is probably things that will fail, but we need to help them get experience, because that's where they can grow, right?
Right.
And then this is the stuff that are disruptive. Probably it makes sense logically. Probably it makes sense from whatever historically or not. But this guy is doing completely different. Let's give it a chance, right? Probably 1 in 1,000 that they will succeed and make it big, but probably they fail. But it's okay. But now I think we have a lot of projects here that they want guaranteed progress, though it's only 1%. Probably.
Do they want progress though? I think because defining disruptive,
yes,
that is where a lot in the last couple months, and you're catching me at a very words mean things time of my life, because in Pittsburgh we use disruptive, we use innovative, we use proactive. We use transformational, and then the thing we say we want to do following those words are the antithesis of those words. So I'm always challenging people to define disruptive, define progress,
right?
Because I've 100,000% guaranteed once you define what you're talking about, I can tell you how that's not what you think it is.
Right. So I think, I completely agree with that the definition is really the key. I think in my last podcast I also mentioned about the definition being very important. And Storyburgh also has a series of events that we call Demilitarized Zone, where we speak about our personal experiences. They usually, again, cringy stuff. And I mentioned about the importance of definitions. Just like you said, probably the definition of progress is different from person A to person B. Their perception of progress is different from A and B, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's it's something that we have to get used to in defining what they are first before we talk about it, right?
Right.
And then again, going back to being accountable to what we say with what we're going to do is also the key, right? And and going back to why don't they do that? Why do they want to be held accountable? I mean, I know that it's hard because that's going to be measured negatively sometimes, right? But
I felt like that also is going into something like defining, and a lot of people are internalizing what's happening or personalizing it, right? So I've been, and I don't know if it's a privilege or not, but I think coming from my background and speaking about those things, I've been held accountable my entire life. I've been blamed my entire life. I am totally fine with holding myself accountable.
Probably.
Probably.
Yeah.
I'm anticipating it. I've never not been in a place where what I do or what I say hasn't been challenged. And I don't think I'm always right, but I want you to prove me wrong. And I'm willing to hear I'm wrong because believe me, I'm going to do whatever I can do in my power to be right, always. So the sooner you tell me I'm wrong, the sooner it's better for me. And I don't think a lot of people approach it that way because they've always been coddled or put in positions where they weren't challenged, or put in positions that are just purely for optics. And now it something that like irks my nerves about public servants is like, you're literally here to be critiqued. That is the function. And that's how also another problem, like when we talk about definitions, what is the actual the moment we get down to function, then it's like, oh, well, you're supposed to be taking this criticism and doing something with it. It's not criticism. It's literally feedback. And I think if we're approaching it as like a learning loop or a feedback loop where it's not me, Amber Thompson, being criticized, but it's the work on behalf of this institution being criticized.
But it's the difficulty, I think, multiplies when we talk about the elected officials, right? The government, because as soon as we give them feedback, they're going to say, oh, you're giving fuel to my opponents. You're giving, you want, those people on the other side be your government, be the mayor or be whatever, right? It's like, so what? I can't say anything then? I mean, exactly. I can only prop you like, oh, we're not worthy, right? I mean,
your analogy of taking the punch. That's why I like it so much, is that, no, we're taking that energy and we're redirecting it. We're reusing it. It doesn't mean I'm taking it. I'm not taking this punch. I'm going to use this punch.
Yeah.
That is definitely, that is why our Democratic officials running on those tickets, it being, you can't critique us, blah, blah, blah. Well, if you don't continue to get critiqued, you're not going to get better, and you're definitely not getting reelected. Like, the pattern is there. It's very clear in Pittsburgh what happens. So you might want to know what you're not doing well, so you can do it better.
Yeah, and it brings me to the point of that infamous 2019 study of Pittsburgh inequality across gender and race, right? So I think when I read that, I think back in November 2019, right? It was, this is, it was done by the Gender Equity Commission, funded by the city of Pittsburgh. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
I was so hopeful at that time. wow, they're admitting finally. I was hoping that based on those, for those who don't know about this, basically the report says that, yeah, ranked the city as the worst in the country for Black women, right? So I was hopeful then that that they're going to create something. They're going to create projects, or they're going to create programs, or they're going to create an institution to address that, to to address what the report says, right? I was envisioning, okay, hopefully the mayor had this war room dashboard. Boom, the Gender Equity Commission report, or this. These are the measurement, and this is the project that we're going to do to tackle that. Give me progress, give me a report in 3 months.
Right.
I was hoping for that. But then I just, crickets noise for the past, 4 years?
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, if you talk to any black women in the city, they'll tell you that they've been saying this.
Right.
The year before that report came out, it actually came out while I was in Philadelphia. And for me to finish grad school, I had to find an internship that would let me get like a large scale product be bought by a large scale company. And I couldn't get an internship in Pittsburgh. I ended up having to apply in DC, Jersey, Philly, New York, because I knew if I went there, I could move there. But everyone was looking at me like, you're not getting hired, you can't work. And then that report comes out and everyone's apologizing because I had to literally move across the state to finish my degree, right? But the background in that story that is not told with that gender equity report was the city did pay Pitt, but there was a black woman, I can't think of her name right now, that did apply for it, that had already been doing research around that area. And I believe she was like either working with UPMC or Pitt, but she was a researcher.
Right.
And she didn't get the contract. So when that study came out, there were black women on that team, not, going against them as their identities on that team, but they're under an institution that, uses black people. So the momentum of that report was bound to fail from the moment the city signed that contract with a non-black woman, or signed the contract with a non-black woman. Who cares what the researchers look like? The institution was the University of Pittsburgh. And there are still a lot of black women, like Black Women's Policy Agenda, that are continuing that report because, so often in the city, non-people of color are tasked to lead things to impact marginalized people. That was the worst example. Like, why would you? What came out of it? We already knew that was going to come out of that report. That's what I'm trying to say. Like,
right. I mean, this is what we mentioned earlier about hiring consultants to say
exactly
something that we already know like a long time ago, but you're just like, okay, why didn't you say it?
Yeah, and recycling what people have been saying. So it would have been better to take on a study that would have pushed it further in that first round versus saying the obvious. And then the region's lack of response. And you know what? Well, I will say, something that I'm also doing is I do think that gender equity report is being used for institutions to fundraise. They're getting money based on the data in that report.
And which is sad that, sometimes when you fundraise something, right? I mean, you fundraise for A, right? For a project A. I mean, I guess this is a fair example of lack of accountability, right? You say you're going to use that money for this, then what's the result? Right?
Exactly. The result, but the way that report was wrote, we know that they're not going to use the money to change that would happen in the gender equity report. That's my beef of what's happening in this region. We're receiving hundreds of millions of dollars to solve issues of minoritized communities, led by non-minoritized people, but somehow they're getting the larger chunks of these pots of money. And there's no accountability because they don't have to put out their applications. They don't have to tell us how they used my data to get that money. They don't tell us who is responsible to carry out these initiatives.
Who, us? The public?
The
or
public.
The public. Because they would tell the
they'll tell
grantor,
the funder.
right?
Yeah, they'll tell the funder. Yeah, they'll have the whole scope and the whole project plan. Now I've looked at a lot of these, a lot of money that's come to this region. Look at these applications, and they're using language like racial wealth gap, the gender equity report. There was another report, not the Marshall Plan. There's like an environmental report. They use these reports that literally say like justice and equity issues. We're solving it with this plan,
right.
And not a percentage of that money goes to any of the people impacted. Some of them, it can't go to them. And I put that in quotes because y'all find a way to give money to your buddies when it can't go to them any other time. Why can't we find ways to give money to the people that are impacted?
Yeah. I think, like it comes down to what they're going to do about that. They give the money to people who they're comfortable with. Again, right? Just like, so they're shooting for mediocre. They're shooting for status quo, right? I mean, for those people that they have known in the past that have been doing stuff in this space that, I mean, they have no incentive to improve it because they've been getting money anyways, right? And they've been thriving with the existing systems, right?
Right.
And then you mentioned about the various reports that we have. Yeah, even in journalism, right? I think several years ago, there's an American Journalism Project about a report about this, what came up. I think it was part of the Ep.2, the Pittsburgh Media Partnership, right? And also there, I posted on my cabinet right there. I think it's by American Press Institute, the report that came out in February 2023, and it was done by Dr. Luttrell. Right?
Yeah.
So I put that chart as my motivation, right? Inclusion index, Pittsburgh scores, diversity 2.5, out of 4 to 5 being the greatest, right? And then trust is 1.0. That means the public do not trust us, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, so I'm just, again, I'm hopeful.
Yeah.
I'm
no, you got to be hopeful,
right? So
you have to
it's
be.
like, what are they going to do about this, right? Again,
you have to put this has to be at the beginning of everything you do. Like when you open up this, report back to that, but put it in context while we're here every single time. Because
I like that.
His report was fun, but it's also been something we've been saying in Pittsburgh. He knows that. So it's for the people who don't know or who aren't listening intentionally. Because I'm never going to assume that folks in the media space don't know this. They know. If there's any space that knows this, it's them. There's no excuse. So yeah, that report, the data in that, in the context at which you're approaching it, should be reviewed every single time. This is where it was.
Yep.
This is where we're at, and this is why we're doing this.
Right. So sometimes people just, again, they nitpick the areas that they are comfortable with, right? But they are kind of neglecting that. What's the lowest score in this project, right? You can't just deal with assets without dealing with trust, right? I mean, trust is probably assets. I mean, developing assets is probably, I call it as a cost center, while trust is your revenue. If you build trust, then people would buy your newspapers, your magazines, whatever, right?
Right.
While assets, you're building up resources, to tackle those news reporting. I mean, that's a cost, right? You have to hire people, you have to get equipment. That's cost. I think number one priority should be how can people trust? Which leads to purchasing the media, purchasing the things that we do, right?
Right.
Yeah, so I agree. Thank you for that suggestion. I think probably, in the beginning of podcast, like trust 1.0. Where are we now?
Where are we now? Because this is where I'm leading, right? The world we're going towards is people are going to invest without funders. through their own. We are strapped for cash now. We're going to be very meticulous about where we're going to put our resources, and we're looking for that bang. So if you're telling me at the beginning of your podcast, you're giving me the transparency on the issues in the area, you're telling me how you're working on it, now I feel more valued to participate in this. Now I feel more compelled to invest in you, right?
Yeah, thank you for the feedback. That's really great. Yeah, so if you want, we are doing this so we can increase the trust of the public to whatever we do, right? And I see that you have, with your life and your work, you have been navigating numerous systems. And let me touch on the education, something that you also mentioned in your
drink my water for that one.
Prepare yourself. Right there, you said that there are multiple systems that impact education, and I think relying solely on teachers as where that burden lays is the problem of our institution. Can you elaborate on that?
I think whenever, and this is very lay, but this is also intentional of the way that our political education works around these things.
Why everything has to be political? I mean, that's another, right? That's kind
of... I challenge that too. Because I look at whenever folks, when I'm consulting, they're saying if I'm working with a agnostic, I put that in quotations, they're neutral. They'll say we don't get political. These are human rights issues. Y'all politicize that. Political, like whenever we say political education, this is the way we are using our biases, our understanding, our morals to govern. We're deciding how, whenever we say political, this is a governance issue. I'm talking about human rights before it's even governed. That is how I differentiate when I'm talking about, and researchers are, well, this is still political. It can be political, but communicate that politicalness is around how we're governing. I'm talking about human rights, and I'm not talking about human rights through a white lens. I'm talking about human rights through a world lens, focusing on like indigenous communities, not through corporate America, right? But in education, we have this attitude of our teachers are the problem. We need better teachers. Our principals are the problem. We need better principals. Just like what I was going to say about the funders, the way the money has to be allocated sometimes set us up for failure. The same way that our education system is designed. The way our state governs education allows us to predict what the outcomes of our education systems will be based on zip codes. And I think another part of our education is the teachers have less power, especially in large school districts like ours, like Pittsburgh Public. They have less power. Even though they're unionized, their union is still a problem. Unions are problems there. I'm pro-union 130,000%. But also understand that unions have a very bad reputation with Black people in this city. So two things can occur at once. Pro-union, also unions have very bad relationships and trust with Black people. But teachers, even though they're unionized, they still don't have the power to choose their curriculum. They don't have the power to choose the resources they're putting in their classrooms. They don't have the power to choose the size of their classrooms, right? And the tools that they are given are punitive. But there's no way to lift up the children or to support the children or support the families. The teachers are beholden to change every systemic issue in the district and not the district. Our local school district, Pittsburgh Public, I have a whole bunch of issues with them. A whole bunch of it. I can't not go into it. I'm gonna say follow Black Women for a Better Education on Facebook. Sign up for the newsletter, and you will get updates as much as you want on that. But our education system, to me, is where every marginalized issue intersects. Our schools, and folks look at this as when we point the blame at the teachers. If every system intersects in the school, then we have our local legislation to blame. We have our local community economic to blame. We have our local healthcare system to blame. We have our local environmental issues to blame. We have our local food access and state and federal. Point being, teachers cannot overcome that. There's no way. Principals can't overcome that. They are not empowered in Pittsburgh Public to do that. Is the way Pittsburgh Public set up is you have one brain, central office, and they think for everybody.
Yeah, you're so right about that, right? I mean, some, let me just say, some people just think school as a daycare.
I mean,
right? So because when parents have to work, right? And then so what are the kids gonna do? So that's why during the COVID, that it's like chaos.
That was rough. That's a really, really good example, because it's disheartening to say that parents think of the school as a daycare, because we're putting the problem on the parents whenever our local region doesn't pay people, right? Again, whenever folks there's an equity initiative in the school district now as part of one. I can't do more than one. It's part of one conversation. They're like, why are there so many parents here? They have to work. These are working parents. And we always say meet people where they're at. That is like telling them to come to the school, and you're bringing the meeting to the school. That's not meeting them where they're at. Parents are working. Parents are in some of these households are multiple generations. Some of these households have people with disabilities, right? With the expectation of putting the onus on the parent in a region that does not pay people, especially people of color, especially women, what did you expect? Please explain to me what you expect. The school district could do a better job of getting information for the city in regards to pay equity, or vice versa. There could be a better working relationship between the three voting bodies to address economic issues, because the school district will never be able to solve what's happening on behalf of the parents by not working with the county and the city. Not possible.
So considering that, every parents and the kids, they are of a different environment. They have different needs. They have different capability, and probably for the household also capacity for all those different things that that people have to think about. What do you think of school vouchers, where parents can, if they think this is more suitable for this kind of school, right? Their situation is more suitable for public school. Their situation, right? I mean, because everybody's different. Everybody has different needs.
Yes.
So what do you think about school vouchers?
I am pro parent choice, especially Black parents. I think a lot of people. I was a parent that believed keeping my daughter in the public school would change it for. I had a lawyer. I could only change it for a handful of kids. That's me being one parent is not changing that school district. So I do advocate for parents finding better spaces for their children. I don't support the voucher system, because I see the voucher system coming to me. Well, when I was in Pittsburgh Public, now I'm in Fox Chapel. When the voucher would come to me, I couldn't use that. I didn't make enough money to send my daughter to the school. I have a child with disabilities. The money that follows her, I can't even remember what the dollar is anymore. It's like $23,000 or something. The pay out of pocket, the schools I want her to put her in, the voucher is like a 16th or a 20. It is pennies to what it would cost to pay for a private school. And all that voucher is doing is taking more money out of the public school. Parents should have options, and parents should not rely on the public school. But the voucher system is just a way to target and under-resource the public school versus actually helping parents, especially low-income parents, place their children in better schools. I'm not getting a voucher for $47,000 a year. When I see that, then I'll believe, okay, you really do care about educating low-income families.
Okay, right. So if the voucher is pegged at a certain number, that's not gonna work, right? Because school has the
It's
tuition is
expensive.
variety of stuff, right?
So expensive.
So unless the choice is like you can go to school to any school you want and 100% it will be covered, right? So that will be a game changer.
Yeah, and those schools, and you know, Sewickley, Shadyside, they have scholarships. Catholic, or I can't think of that Catholic school.
Central Catholic,
yeah, Central
Oakland
Catholic.
yeah.
They have scholarships. They don't go. They might go to low income, but they don't go to children with disabilities or people with disabilities. But they have a system to give 100%. The voucher system the vouchers are used to under-resourced public school. They're not used to place children because we care about education. So, we care about taking tax dollars out of education so people don't have access to free education. That's what we care. That's what they care about, not me.
Yeah. So it's a halfway measure that
I wouldn't even say half. It's like minuscule.
Pennies to the dollar.
Pennies. Right? It is embarrassing. It's absolutely embarrassing to send someone like a $1,000, $2,000 voucher, and the school I was looking at was like 41,000.
Yeah. So it's a incomplete solution to the problem that they're trying to solve. Yeah. Again, it's going back to the accountability, right? So accountability to do what? So when they define the problem, okay, say the problem that I want to have my kids educated from K to 12 properly, right? So we have to define what is education, right? What is properly, right? What is, so you have to define that. And then when you get that, and then you measure the success or not, and then you work to improve it until you are successful, right?
Exactly.
And this kind of, I don't know. I mean, this workflow, right? Yeah, we're still missing that.
And the accountability in Pittsburgh Public is where I'm working at, right? The outcomes we're trying to achieve on behalf of children have never been defined. Now, and I'm going to say that across this whole region and every industry, we have never defined outcomes for minoritized people. We just say we're helping Black people, but we never say what this help should look like. Education is no different. And to me, us moving forward without those outcomes and then without the accountability metrics, the policies, the processes, and then understanding the practices, right? The trust. We don't know how well we're doing. We're never ever going to move forward as a region if we don't discern the outcomes we're trying to do and who we're working with to achieve those outcomes. Right. That's, so the voucher system is very alive and well, but I do think we should invest in our public schools. I'm a product of a public school. My school is one of 4 schools to sue the state on the way the dollars are allocated. I went to a very small, poor school, but I know I got a better education than a lot of people I went to school with at WVU. And just thinking about what I had to learn in this, small town, just because, our teachers were afforded the ability to invest in our curriculum as well. But now it's hurting us. It's hurting my small school district. You're saying we're graduating kids all of our kids are going to college and they're graduating. They're doing great things in the world, but we're not getting money like the other schools who, like Pittsburgh Public, is underperforming. But I do think we should invest in the public schools. I don't think we should have voucher systems, but I do think we should give parents choices, but better choices.
Yeah, so that's tough, right? I mean,
there's a lot of nuance in education. It's why a lot of people don't touch it, because these are and I know they're very, when you say cringy, I have to be comfortable with saying that. I had to come to terms with like, well, I know this probably isn't the best way. I know a lot of people are going to receive this differently, but I'm not an ideologue. So.
Right. And also, this is the beauty of the space, of this is the Convos. I mean, your experience, you're not just writing this out of your abstract, writing a book. No, you're experiencing it every day with your child, with
every
yourself,
day.
Right? So it's...
and other children. I have cousins in Fox Chapel. I have a godson in North Hills. Like, I have friends, I'm very tapped in the educational space in the region. And again, we need clear outcomes that we want on behalf of our children.
Right. So talking about outcome, and then we spoke about the K-12. What about university? Right.
I just read a very interesting report this morning, so I would love this one. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, okay, universities are all about increasing enrollment, right? So that's how they get their money, right? Well, probably all the R1 schools, they have the research schools, and they also want to have the grant money or the research money from whoever, right? From DARPA, from NSF, from NIH, or from the private Microsoft, Google, whatever, right? So they're all about enrollment as well. And how do we? But then at the same time, we see that people, the kids, they graduated from college, but then they're not working in the field that they are majored in. And sometimes they are then promised that, hey, why don't you get the master? Why don't you get your, more education? And then they pile up more loan, and then at the end of it, they're still not getting it, right? So how can we address that? So that now we're talking about canceling the loan, right? So I think sure, right, that's great. I think that's a short term, but then in the long term solution is we have to also think about how effective is this, especially this AI is coming, right? So I think it's good that somebody is like going down, I don't know, probably seclude themselves for 3 months and then come up with a comprehensive, here's what it should be, right? And then these are the gap, and this is what the projects that we have to do, right? One of the, okay, so let's talk about university.
Who does that? I want to be part of that, because I feel like I'm doing it by myself because no one is
actually. You need to write grants first to get the money.
Yeah. That again, the allocation of like those grants, NIH, NSF, the SBIRs, STTRs, they made it so you have to partner with institutions now. It's the institutions that need the change. It is literally cyclical. It is driving me absolutely
shooting for mediocres again, right?
Constantly. It is a vicious cycle. It's like you just made it more mediocre. There's no accountability in these institutions now because now you're saying people have to partner with them. Of course, Pitt's not going to want to partner with me. Why would they? That doesn't make sense. They're like, we already invested in DEI. I'm not DEI, firstly, but anyway. So there's a.
Now you're a cringy woman.
Yeah, sorry. It's definitely getting more cringy. I'm gonna stop. It's definitely gonna go real cringy on that
water,
one.
By the way, if you want water, it's right there.
So basically, especially in our region, around education, we have reports. One came out, was it this year or late last year? Pitt was enrolling less students from the region. They're not incentivized to enroll from the Pittsburgh Promise that gives them pennies to what Pittsburgh University of Pitt tuition is like. We have CMU who's Pitt's trying to copy CMU's model, where they're taking students in, international students, and a lot globally. Chatham, trying to do the same. But in these loans, the loan forgiveness, they're adding on that defense loans is that if your school promised you a job, promised you would get these things, now you can get your loans forgiven. Now, how students prove that, I think, is a mechanism to change the way these schools are operating, because those promises is what put people in these programs. But I will always talk about workforce development in our region. It's a one-way street. So if Pitt says, we're going to have this program, now we're in AI robotics, all this money, blah, blah, blah. We're going to say Pitt has this program, CMU has this program. You go through this program, get an internship, then you might get a job placement. That's one way. You never said that person's being placed in the company that person's being placed in has to also do development. They also have to be able to take this student in as them whole self, right? And we have a one-way street of workforce development where even if Pitt or CMU or the kids aren't staying here. They're not staying here.
Yeah.
because you're not investing in these companies these companies are allowed to cover up their toxicity. They are coddled. They are bubble wrapped in accountability, and it's hurting our region to not only retain diverse talent, but to retain the students. And we can't even retain the people that are from here. We're losing on all battles. It's our corporate culture, because our corporate culture bleeds into our nonprofit. This is the nonprofit industrial complex. This is the headquarters of MPIC, Pittsburgh, right? We're working on very toxic cultures. So that workforce development, that pipeline from our universities to our workforce, it has to be a two-way street. The academic institutions have to be honest about business management, honest about economics, and communicate that to our institutions. Not this, they built these internal consulting teams just to get money to support the research for it not to be used. Just don't make any sense to me. Why would you go all this way to get this money to not use the research? Excuse me. I can't process it at all. But I read a report this morning that CMU and Pitt both had legacy models in their, like, as an applicant. They had a legacy assessment. For what? Please explain. And I know how CMU's internal works. A lot of their business, the resources are based on legacy. That kind of made sense to me. I don't agree with it, but Pitt? What world are we living in? But neither of them do it anymore. But they did.
They did. Okay.
Very recently. I'm still trying to process reading about that this morning in the trip. So.
Yeah. So I like that idea, but the loan forgiveness only if they tried to get their job that they are promised in and they couldn't. So yeah.
Because I'm sure a lot of kids were.
It's like, you're buying a new TV and it doesn't work, you get a refund.
Right? The logic's logicking.
Right. So you have to use Costco models. So you need to.
Yeah. Like I went to Point Park. My undergrad was at Point Park. And I will credit my professors. I think I had great professors. They were all in the field versus like if I went to Pitt and they're all just researchers.
Very true.
And I had that, this is what it's really like. We had class in the field and we were working as social workers. We were doing research as social workers from all different type of sectors. So I knew what I was getting into. Through my program. And I can't imagine, Pitt pumping out these social workers who the first time they've had to experience like a crisis is in their job 6 years after going to school. That's you should get your money back. You absolutely should get your money.
At least partial. Let's start on that. Yeah. Right? Get 10%.
Yeah. You should totally get some money back. That's the first time you saw a crisis.
Yeah, especially the tuition is crazy. I mean, it's
insane.
I once talked to I think she was a vice provost at Pitt several years ago, and she was new to the job then. Again, this is many years ago, and she said that the cost. A lot of money was spent on facilities because that's what attracted general students, especially students from the outside of Pittsburgh, right? And I was like, I didn't know about that. But then I noticed that a lot of universities outside Pittsburgh that they are making, the facility, the classrooms more, beautiful. They have these projectors, they have Wi-Fi everywhere, they have all this seating area. So I was like thinking, that's why it's making it more expensive. But then are the kids going to universities for education or for experience? Right. You know, I mean, so we could, experience is also, you know, education is certainly part of experience, but not vice versa.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, if a lot of money is spent on the experience, then probably we need to rethink about that. Right. So,
Yeah.
we just like when my kids went to elementary school, you know, to K-12, well, even in college too, right? Their textbooks are crazily heavy. Why do they have to be that heavy? I mean, you know, like first grader or I
Yeah.
mean, third grader probably, right? So I get all these textbooks, yeah, you know, like a polished, nice hardcover. Why? Like,
Yeah.
and then they have to carry them, right? That's like a back problem.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
Yeah.
is there a way? I mean,
Yeah, there's a way to not have tech. I'm not I'm a reader of like research journals. I'm not a like story reader. So I always preface that, like when I say I don't like to read, that is, so I'm not a book person.
Yeah.
So to me, if I was a book person, I would be totally fine with a tablet. Like I read on my computer, I read on my phone constantly. I read on my phone. I have so many different data things I'm constantly reading on my phone. And it's just like, you know, I think especially when you're talking about education experience, a lot of those things are accessibility issues. And whether it's pre-K to 12 or, you know, post-secondary or whatever, if we put it through a frame of accessibility and we address the most marginalized issues, those benches, those seating areas would still be there. The projectors would still be there. But that investment would be, what is the word, scaled differently.
Yeah.
Because we're more focusing on people accessing this classroom versus being able to be like a very ableist way of, being educated in this classroom. So I think like a lot of those things would still be there whenever they're saying we're investing in the building. But if you invest in the building through like an accessibility way, it would look much different and it would be better and you'd attract more students.
Yeah, the definition, right? I mean, you make it better, right? Well, what does it mean, right?
Exactly.
Does it mean you have Herman Miller's chairs? No, right?
Right. Right.
You have, you know, like a larger door frame so people with wheelchairs can come in. Yes.
Yeah.
Right. So you have to.
It might be one level.
Definition, right?
It might have to be smaller classrooms. Again, it just makes things better.
Right.
If you're really trying to make it better.
Yeah, and what better is, right? Yeah.
But
we're not talking about stadium yet.
Yeah.
That's not $1 billion problem.
Right. But no, y'all went too far. You can come real back in just a little bit and start here through like an accessibility lens, and this would be way better.
Right.
And that's what really, especially in this region, whenever we talk about this space is cringy, it's cringy because nobody wants to talk about it. But other cities,
they don't want to hurt people. I don't know, hurt themselves.
It's not hurt themselves. But other cities, right, where they're having real issues, like Minnesota, they're having great like advancements, right? And I talk about a colleague who helped me early on in my the development of my platform. He lived in Singapore. That's what attracted him. He's like, oh well, like I literally live in a country that everything is race based, and everything is like intentionally focused on like classism, right? You know, because there's such a great inequity. They're trying to figure out how to decrease it. So processing it through the lens of other places that are doing this, it's like you see people going to conferences constantly, or conferences coming here. What have you learned? Why aren't y'all bringing that information back to the city? Or if you are, what are the barriers to you using it? Because I literally feel like I'm like in the Stone Age here. This is the Stone. You see, talking about PNC at the PCRG summit. PNC is investing in this. It is a very large initiative. I believe it's in Minnesota, and it looks so great. And I know the organization working on behalf of it. I know they are doing the work. Why isn't PNC investing in that in Pittsburgh? Why? Because you're headquartered here. Why are you investing in something that rapidly changed another region? And then another consultant told me that city and state are actively having these conversations. And she's like, it's been at least 10 years now.
Wow.
they're actively having these. And she's like, yeah, PNC is definitely at the table. She's like, yeah, they're for sure putting money up for this, but we don't have anybody. We have corporate cover up. You invest in covering this up. You invest in no data accountability. I worked with a colleague at a legacy organization. He's not from here. He's like, I've worked in 3 major cities, way bigger than Pittsburgh, and I never had issues on getting data like I've had here.
Wow.
And that's why he reached out to me. He's like, can you? I was like, yeah, I can get you the data, but this is internal. You got some internal issues. And he's like, yes, I do. But he's like, it's not just me. It's all my colleagues who are tasked with this change across all these major corporations in this region. And none of them are actually have to provide. They're not even collecting the right data. And then I learned why that's not happening. But we have, because if they collect the data, they have to respond on it.
They have to be accountable. The A word.
Yeah. And if they're a public institution, they're accountable to the SEC. So the SEC has a time limit on that accountability. Which is, his theory was like, you should work through ethics and compliance, because then they have 18 months to make your data look better. I'm like, that's why. I had no idea. He's like, yeah, but that's why they won't. Those institutions don't collect it. He's like, I don't know what the excuse or private ones are, but you still have to go through ethics and compliance, still has to go to your board. And the moment that information's made public to your board, then the organization...
have to report it, yeah. Now let's, the topic that you also, mentioned is the NPIC, the nonprofit organization, nonprofit industrialization complex. And you mentioned that this is where performative and transactional are more prevalent to me. And we just tally bodies. It's easy to get in the habit of not being able to activate or operationalize. Wow, you nailed it, So we have...
I said that?
Yes, you did.
Yeah, it's cringy to hear. It sounds great to say, though.
Right. So, we have, Pittsburgh has a lot of nonprofits, and a lot of nonprofits, some of the nonprofits they actually share missions and goals, but they are everywhere. They are not organized, and there's no project, program, or incentives for them to work together, to collaborate, because they're not incentivized to collaborate. They're incentivized to tally more bodies. Like, what is your impact? In terms, and usually it's easiest when the impact is, number of bodies are, reading your article or attending your event, but not actually the problems, right? So, and then you also mentioned that a lot of organizations, they don't do what their missions and vision, whatever goals are written on their website or anywhere, right? And so why is that? I mean, what do you see in there?
So in the nonprofit industrial complex, what is that, like a noun? The verb of that is non-profiteering, right? So whenever we're talking about their tallying bodies, they're also, because of them tallying bodies, they're also competing with their who they should be collaborating with. For those bodies, right? So the mission, vision, all of that goes back to consulting. We create these strategic plans, blah, blah, blah. We come up with these mission and visions. It starts with there are no values. And there are no measurable values, right? The point is to be able to measure these things. The disconnect is your mission and vision's like a couple sentences. It could be a paragraph. It could be a book. But if you don't have values to measure these things to, every engagement you have, every partner you have is just that, an engagement or a partnership. But it's not sustainable. It's just counting. 1 engagement, 2 engagements, 1 partnership, 2 partnership. And those people are going to feel burned or this is transactional. It's very transactional in this region because we're just counting bodies. We're not counting the impact or the outcomes of the bodies that we've counted. And what I've been processing is how to communicate. Those are just inputs. That is not those aren't metrics. Those are inputs. And that is a huge issue in this region, is everyone's telling these things they're measurable. You can measure inputs, yeah, but those aren't outcome-based metrics. They're not even outputs. And that's also where we confuse that. Outputs and outcomes are not the same thing either, right? Outputs are like very tangible things, like the documents we created, right? If I was a newspaper, my outputs would be my newspaper, my email list, my listserv. The outcome is, what decisions were made from people receiving this newspaper, right? Did they write in and give us more information? Did we break a story because of, our articles on these things? Those are outcomes.
Right.
And non-profiteering in the nonprofit space, the funders don't understand how to calculate their outcomes. So they're not going to force the nonprofits to do it. They're only asking for those bodies, but then they give them pennies for the bodies. And now the nonprofit, instead of saying, oh, I could get more bodies and outcomes, because the nonprofits understand they need some impact. Oh, I could get bodies and impact if I work with this organization. But now we have to go in on this grant together. Maybe they already received the grant from them and they can't receive more money from them. So we've knocked that partnership out. We bring them together. Maybe the foundation's going to give us, now we have to split this money. That's less money for us, and it knocks that partnership out. And then there are organizations or funders that say we do invest in collaboration, like that's their new thing. But then they make you have to work with another institutional partner who is the problem. Like the people who've been doing it.
Yeah. Haven't done squat. Yeah, haven't.
That's my line. If you were an ED before 2020 and your organization hasn't transformed anything, you should be out by now. It's 2023. We already know. Right? So the way that money is being allocated is pitting each other against each other. And I always say this about the CDFIs or CDCs or SBDCs, like all of these membership organizations. If there's no way to bring in sustainable capital without nonprofits or grants, you're non-profiteering. You're competing against the people you're supposed to be supporting. Because you're putting their names on these grants and they're going for the same grant as you. This is what this region does. Also, again, it pushes out the corporate responsibility. There's no corporate responsibility here because everybody says, well, there's a nonprofit to do that, right? When I lived in Philly, my job was like to find the nonprofits. I'm like, what? If I was in Pittsburgh, I have like 20 on the phone right now. The partnerships in Philly, like NBC, Verizon, they look so much different than in Pittsburgh. And that's because there's, I don't know if it's healthy or not, or what's missing or what's not missing. Nonprofits are paid the same in Philly as they are in Pittsburgh. So it's not like people are making money or aren't making money. But there's this collaborative effort between the nonprofits and the for-profits to make that capital impactful, expansive, compounding. We don't have that relationship here outside of UPMC. Again, anything they donate to is probably some kind of like write-off at this point. They're a nonprofit, but they operate like a corporation. That's not debatable. Or like the PNCs and the bank's philanthropic arms, right? They're only given an institutional partners too. They might give $50,000 here to like a nonprofit here and there, but they really work with institutional partners. Non-profiteering is the problem. All day, every day. When I look at, and I think it's weird to me that I can read people's mission and visions and look at their work and be like, this doesn't match. And people are like, well, how do you know? Well, if this was really their mission and vision, they would have did this differently because they would have achieved some. Or they would have achieved what they were trying to achieve. But yeah, we don't have measurable values. Non-profiteering means the nonprofits are competing with each other, so they're making bad business. They're not bad business decisions. It's not a bad business decision to be able to fundraise. They're prioritizing that grant over the partnerships over the initiative, over the objectives of the organization. That's what's happening
Right.
locally.
And also the grant process itself, yeah, it's tiring. And I forgot where I was. I attended something about. Oh, I completely forgot. But it's several months ago at Obama High School at East End, and um, and then there was a gentleman in our. So we have the breakout session. And then gentleman basically literally dropped out of the conversation saying, yeah, oh, I'm not interested in fighting for crumbs with other nonprofits.
Exactly.
Yeah, so the process is lengthy and tedious, and a lot of energy that have been to be put to create these documents, and then you compete with other people who some nonprofits, even like Storyburgh here, we are a nonprofit too, and we're it's 1-2 person operations, and can't afford that. I mean,
Nope.
you spend hours and hours and hours for grants, and then that you're only going to be competing for this, this I don't know, $5,000, $10,000, right? And then you're competing with other organizations, and it's like, why are we doing this? Right? Why? And then when you look at the other organizations in the same space, like there must be a better way to spend energy and brains and thoughts together, as opposed to just fighting with each other. How can we collaborate instead? Right? Probably,
Yep.
because of egos, probably it's hard for one organization to speak with another organization or take the initiative to speak with each other.
Yeah.
Then probably the grantors, the people with money, the foundation with money, they need to organize that, right? Let's have this, probably based on that research that they do, being hermit for 3 months, they come up with all this comprehensive project that have to be done. Then probably said, okay, these are the stuff that we have to accomplish. Let's talk. Who wants to not bid, but who wants to come into the conversation, and let's do this. Who are the right match for this project 1A? Who is the right,
Right.
organization for this 5C, right? So everything is identified, and then and that's how the corporates do it. I mean, why can't we?
Yeah, that's a good point. I always process like the way the grant cycles and the monies, and like I think a part of this conversation that anyone who's a grant writer would tell you is the donor advised funds, right? The money that they're giving out is not, what is the word? Well, it's not accessible, firstly, right? There are people getting tax write-offs to give money to the nonprofits. Then that money sits in this fund to not be used because they don't intend on funding these things. So I always process it like, how much of that money are we taking that already has strings attached? Right? So it starts from there. The foundations have to stop taking the strings, or the family foundations have to stop thinking they know the answer. Because I think that's the difference between the corporations and the nonprofits, is that the corporation, it is accountable to something. Whether it's a real accountability or not, they have to report something. The nonprofits don't. They're not supposed to, they're nonprofits. I don't believe that, just so we're clear. They operate the same way to me. Nonprofits, for-profits are a business.
Yep.
They have a balance sheet. They're the same thing.
Yeah, it's just the accounting thing.
Right? But like the way that corporations, they're able to do that because there are folks that are accountable in those institutions to get rid of this money. Their money's not sitting.
I like that. Responsible to get rid of this money.
To get rid of this money.
Yeah, 5% every year, right?
That's it. That's exactly it. But the nonprofits are not doing that. And then whenever we process it that way, right, I'm always thinking about the non-FO 501c3s, right? The IRS is another problem in this, and who can get a 501c3 and who can't, who can maintain it and who can't, are also barriers in that. So the foundations will give that money, but now you have to get a fiscal sponsor. Right. Now that person, not saying they shouldn't get money, but if my fiscal sponsor is a white person, we're going to have some conversations. Because reparations are real. That's also another barrier. So I always process it like, yeah, there are better ways to do this. These applications aren't real. They're not real. They're not. You cannot tell me that these funders write these applications, said, oh, they'll be able to do this. And I'm like, there's no way. I've seen some of these applications. And people are like, how did they get that money? They get that money because it's a relationship they had with that one person. They had nothing to do with that application. Because they didn't do what was in the application the year before and the year before that. So you can't tell me that they're actually giving money based on it's a whole relationship, just like VC. Everything is it's the same as VC. Why are we acting like any money is different? They give money to who they know.
So it's not merit-based.
There is no merit. There can't be. There cannot be. Now, it's advantageous to say that they're looking for those outcomes. There are foundations that I think are doing that and very intentional around that. But if they're not measuring outcomes in their institutions, how are they enforcing that, or how are they expecting the nonprofits to do it? And they're not.
Yeah. So the last topic, I guess very related to what you just said, that again, I quote, a lot of biases in our region right now are because of the lack of networking.
Yeah.
Right. So are people not comfortable with, I remember there was an article that done by technically.ly, technically, and you are interviewed, right? And then you express your frustration.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you talk about that?
I send many letters to technically too. So the networking, and this is not just a Pittsburgh thing at all.
Okay.
The networking issue is not just a Pittsburgh thing. But if we take what's happening in the education space around parents, we can apply that to the workforce and entrepreneurship. I'm at capacity. Networking is not a thing I want to do. It takes a lot of energy from me, actually. And I'm an extrovert. If I was an introvert,
oh wow,
it would take way more energy for me to network. Networking has to be done on behalf of the institutions and the people with power. Again, it's always a one-way street. I have to go to these events. Not these people have to actually vouch or propose or prioritize like my relationship.
You're not incentivized to that, yep.
And a lot of the work that I do with these organizations when they're talking about economics, well, if you have your procurement and you're collecting your supplier diversity numbers, how are those people that you're paying already part of your network? Are you inviting them to your events? Are you connecting them to other people who are asking for their services? Are you connecting them to other partners in the space, like other businesses, right? The networking conversation is much bigger than, oh, let's have a group membership and then we have events. It's tired. It's right. 2023. You all have privilege. You have power. Do the intentional thing and connect the people that you're connected to. Stop hiring within your network. Literally, an organization said, oh, do you know anyone that could do this? And I'm like, well, it's due in like a week. Why are you asking me now? He's like, well, we just put it out to the board and asked the board to share. And yes, why don't you have an intentional process to bid out or to reach out to very diverse newspapers and put that in there? That right there is how every organization acts. Our capacity is just to go here. No, you can create a very defined process, and someone could be responsible for carrying out that process, and someone responsible for receiving it. The same thing you're doing now. It's just more intentional.
Right.
Let's still have the networking events to still get people in these pipelines, but it don't start and stop there. That's where this region, we invest in organizations that do events, and their outcomes are how many people attend those events. Mm-hmm. That's
sad. Yeah,
that's it. Not how many people are getting jobs.
Yeah. It's not efficient. It's not effective.
No, it's not. It's not working. It's not working.
Right.
And I
agree with you. Yeah. So whenever people have this, oh, we can use this as a networking event, and like it's really not intentional. I think for me it would be better that we're going to have this networking event with the objectives, or make it straight. We want to solve this following problems.
Exactly.
And this is the networking event to solve those problems. Let's make it happen. Right? So when people come, people say, oh yeah, I could help you solve problem this. I could solve that problem. So people can talk. And that's where the real collaboration happen. Right? So,
and making it engaging is another thing. I have a colleague who's doing a research paper on introverts in the entrepreneurial space. And I'm sorry. I am so sorry, because anytime I'm anywhere, I'm like, oof, I'm overstimulated and I'm not an introvert. So literally my first thoughts, and my colleague had reached out to me, she's like, how do you measure something that's for introverts, or how do you measure like introversion in a space? It's, again, accessibility. Like, it's the capacity I have as a person to experience this space that you did not think of at all. Like, there are intentional things you should do. There are capacity things. There are mental health things. There is a whole bunch that should be done into these events. Right. And I'm not saying everyone could do everything. Just like you said, what's your objective? Well, we can scope it down real fast if you really understood the purpose of what we're here for. Yeah. Not wasting people's time. And a lot of people who don't think about introverts or don't think about neurodivergent people Pittsburgh is a gathering place. That is what the issue is. That's not the issue. In those spaces to gather. This is the intentionality around this and understand the people who can experience this. That's really the issue. So I think about you though. I do think about you in those spaces. Because I think about me, I'm like, if I feel like this, there's probably a whole bunch of me's here. And then doing the networking with the technical people, they're engineers are different people. I know engineers that are very not engineering. Right. But the majority of them are in this space for a reason. And you should respect that, But yeah, networking is, again, a two-way street, not one way. You don't say, if I build it, they will come. No, they don't want to come. But yeah, those are my thoughts on networking.
Oh, it's been great. So I think we learned a lot. We know, hopefully our audience also learned a lot. So we have been talking almost 1.5 hours. Yeah, and
I'm probably going. Give me a couple more topics. Definitely helped me clear my mind on some things. Yeah.
So is there anything to add, on your side that I haven't talked about?
I think something that I'm going to take the advantage now. I'm going to use the platform. We talked about data around qualitative and quantitative, and I just learned I think the English language is made up of 30% verbs, which makes so much sense now. Because I'm like, there's not a word for this. There's not a word for this, But when we talk about data and information, we can't get hung up in the numbers. And nonprofits, regardless of the capacity, have to make data-informed decisions. And we have to move beyond counting bodies. We can, in this region, we are starting nonprofits, we're starting programs, we're starting initiatives without fully looking at the ecosystem and understanding where we can fit in it or where we're needed. And, it's running to a lot of duplicative processes, which I truly believe is the reason there's such a large gap in all of our equity issues, because no one has actually said, well, this is what we really need. They do want to do the sexy, pretty, less cringy things. But there is some serious work that needs to be done. And that mapping there's no asset map of this region. Mm-hmm. there's no power building, and nonprofits have to get beyond the data that they have. And it is achievable without you already have the information. You just need to process it coming in, pause, and you have to make those decisions. Whenever you're making decisions about money or making decisions about hiring or making decisions about partnerships or land, pause. But our nonprofits are failing the region, and it's because they're making decisions on their feelings. I hate feelings versus facts, but but I've been crazy this whole time. Let's just add it. You're making decisions on feelings versus facts. And yes, data can be manipulated.
Always.
Understanding how it can be manipulated is more important than not using it.
Right.
So I just want to get that out there. It's probably my next beef with the region. It's just constantly trying to do these asset maps, and nobody is doing it. No, how do we have so many initiatives and there's no asset map?
Yeah, it's just whatever they feel like doing at that time.
I think I saw this. I think I felt this.
And it's sexy. Oh, let's do it. Oh, it's trendy.
Let's do it.
Right? Or it's the right thing, quote unquote, right? I mean, really? I mean, define right. I mean, so
I did a define proactive, and in the moment said you literally used a word that is the opposite of active to describe that. That's a real thing, right? And it's not enough to just say because I will never ever discount someone's feelings or experience, but those feelings experience need to be connected to some kind of reality.
Right.
And it feels very, very disjointed in how this region moves. If these things are happening, why aren't we moving towards these things then? Yes. Why are we moving around them?
Right. So I think that's the final takeaway of this conversation, that we have to be intentional.
Yeah.
Right. And and we can do this collectively, but everybody or the majority of us are intentional, then we could make it happen, right? And also not just the worker bees, not just the nonprofits, but probably also all the way to the powers that be, to the funders, if they are intentional and their mindset is to do this thing collectively, and we can capture both facts and feelings,
right,
and use this bias for to move forward, right? To make it happen, to solve the problems that we've been having.
Yeah.
Right.
Define collectively too.
Yes.
Because
right. Collective. I mean, who's in and who's out?
Exactly.
Right? So...
Well, why?
Right. Right.
I think that expectations.
Yeah.
Of why we're doing it and who we're working with, because people. My friend is doing this. Believe me, any person that's my friend knows they're holding me accountable. I'm holding them accountable. But if we're working as a collective, we should all be holding each other accountable regardless. Yes. Right? That's what always define it. Always define it, and definitely move as a collective.
Yeah, it'd be fun, having conference. The first hour or 2 hours, definitions.
Exactly, and it sounds so boring, but also
it makes it easier in the long run,
it's
right?
So much easier, because now after this, we said, "Well, you said this back there."
Right. Because otherwise, these days, people keeps on throwing jargons and all those sexy names, without understanding. Well, I mean, not they think they understand, but we're not having a common understanding of what they are.
Yeah, because there have been times where I'm definitely okay, well, what are you thinking of, right? And what I'm thinking, what my thought is, I want to be explicit about it in an action. But a lot of people's thoughts are explicit in a theory too. That's also, I'm well, you're theorizing. I'm in practice.
Yeah.
Not saying we shouldn't theorize, but some things we theorized to death. Can we test it out somewhere? Maybe readdress the theory.
Yeah.
But define the collective, because
Yep, a lot of definitions out there.
So
All
many.
right, great. Okay, thank you very much, and it's been great. And I will talk again.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.